My name is Cheyenne Brown, and I'm going to be presenting my reader ladder. This reading ladder, is designed for the 11th grade, so juniors in high school, and it will contain some mature themes and topics because it is for an older group. So the essential question that is going to be for this group is, what does it mean to be an American? So each of these texts are going to try to solve that question. And the way I'm going to structure each class is we're going to read the text, and then we are going to discuss the text, and then we are going to have a time to journal. So kids will be required to have a composition notebook or a piece of scrap paper of some kind as they write questions. Will write about their feelings about how they interpreted the discussion that day. I will have some sample questions up on the board, like, how did this make you feel? Was there any opinions that you disagreed with today? Why? And has this changed your view of America? And obviously they can go off on however way that they need, but I'm just going to have those sample questions there in case they don't know what to write. So the first thing I'm going to use to introduce this is this webcomic by The Oatmeal. The Oatmeal is a comics illustrated by Matthew Inman, and this one specifically is a look into the amygdala, the backfire effect, and the science behind hearing new opinions. So if you actually click on this photo right here, it's a link, and you can actually see the webcomic. And basically what you do is you scroll down and you read, and it comes with a lot of fun illustrations, and I really enjoy it. I think it's really fun. So there's a classroom-friendly option. We'll have to click that classroom-friendly option because there is a few curse words in this that I don't want to share. So, but that one basically just, I'm introducing it there because I'm going to be challenging their beliefs, possibly, if I'm doing my job right, and challenging their ideas of America so far and showing them new insights into the world, or showing them insights that of themselves that they've never seen presented before. So I want to have this webcomic here, like, hey, we're going to have discussions, and you might not agree with one of your classmates, and you might have that amygdala. The comic calls it a like stubbing your toe. You might feel your toe getting stubbed, and you're like, no, I don't agree with that. But acknowledging that it's happening is really important in order to continue the conversation. So next is these two poems, I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman and I Too by Langston Hughes. I'm going to be presenting these poems together. First, I will introduce Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman is a very influential American poet, and it wouldn't be a full conversation about America without him. So this conversation about, this poem about America and how he sees it and how beautiful he sees it. And then I Too by Langston Hughes is actually a direct reference to this poem, where Langston Hughes says, I too sing America, in reference to Walt Whitman. And we'll talk about the American experience through the eyes of Walt Whitman and through the eyes of Langston Hughes and why they varied. And we'll also talk about a little bit about Black history and what it was like to be a Black American and how that changed the American experience for those individuals. Then we're going to get into our first novel, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And this novel is a wonderful way to start the conversation about how you are born changes your American experience. So the protagonist, Ponyboy, in this novel was born into poverty. He lost his parents recently, and it's caused all these different problems for him. And he's just a greaser because he's on that side of town, and he's mistreated because of that. So by talking about those themes that are in this book, like trauma, being in a parentless home, it will get us ready to talk about our young adult novel, The Grief Keeper, which will happen later in this text set. So this will be a good beginning to those conversations. And fair warning, there is some violence in this book, also depictions of kids smoking and children drinking at this time. So it has been a controversial book in the past. I do remember my public school teaching this in 7th grade. So hopefully it'll be okay by the time I get to my 11th graders. So to continue this conversation about poverty, I also want to add in the topic of immigration, because immigration is very important to talk about the grief keeper. So I have a historical source, which is How the Other Half Lives by photojournalist Jacob Riis. So those photos were very influential in the late 1800s. And and they caused a lot of reform. And it was very shocking to see how the other half lives. And then we have these sad, more modern, it's just sad, more modern pictures from the US-Mexico border. And I believe that photo was taken in 2021. So I will show a multitude of Jacob Riis photos, and then also a multitude of photos from the US-Mexico border. We'll be able to compare and contrast them and talk about immigration and poverty and coming into America to get the American dream. So next thing that we need to talk about before we reach the grief keeper is trauma, generational trauma and mental health. So we will talk about mental health and define it for ourselves as a class. Also, we'll define trauma for ourselves as a class. But I really wanted to have this informational video for generational trauma, which in my experience, it's just a little bit harder to grasp. So I really wanted that to be there for them concrete. I also will let counselors know that we are going into this deeper conversation about mental health because the themes in the grief keeper are pretty dark. I also will probably let the people, counselors know about the outsiders as well. And so in this class period, how I imagine it, we will have these conversations about trauma and generational trauma. They'll be able to journal at the end of class like normal, but then instead of just leaving, saying goodbye, I'm going to read to them and show to them. Forget that it plays. I'll be able to read to them and show to them Fighting the Blues by Connie Sun. It is a part of the anthology Take the Mic. It's just a very short little not infographic, comic. Not a web comic, just normal comic. And it looks like this. And it's just very short, just 2 pages. And it talks about hard feelings and how it's okay. This means you're alive, she says. And she encourages young adults that they are not alone. And that's something that I really want my students to understand as we go into these harder topics about mental health, that they might have personal experience with and will be really hard to face. So now we're going to talk about the grief keeper. And there's so much to say about the grief keeper, but it's about Marisol, who's trying to go and enter the US, and she ends up being experimented on because it's crazy. But there is, it contains themes of violence, suicide, and mental illness. There is attempted suicide in the book. And I just want to preface there for my students. And it's just a beautiful novel, which has a lot of hard themes. There is also a LGBTQ couple, a lesbian couple in it. Marisol, actually, I'm not going to spoil it. But so that might be something that I get some flack for, and I'll let my students know ahead of time, or I might just let it be there. We'll see. But I do foresee maybe getting some issues with that. Lastly, I want to end. So we had the grief keeper. We're talking about what it means to be an American. And now I want to add some more perspectives to it, just so we can have a fuller understanding of America. So we have Aurora Rising, which represents an Argentinian American, Homecoming, which represents a Native American, and then Are you the good kind of Muslim, which represents a Muslim Indian American. So Aurora Rising is about how it felt to be Argentinian American after the 2016 campaign with Trump's rhetoric about the wall and cleaning up America. Also, Homecoming shows Grace, a Native American, in the middle of this mascot debate about whether we should have mascot caricatures as representations of sports teams. And then Are You the Good Kind of Muslim shows the impact of Islamophobia felt by the speaker of this poem. And all of these works are extremely powerful, and all of them are within this anthology, Take the Mic. So I want to end this by reading a speech by Marion Kenoshi. This was in 1943, I believe. It was in the middle of World War II. I might be incorrect about the date, but Kenoshi was incarcerated at this time because of Japanese internment after Executive Order 9066. And in this valedictorian speech, she talks about what does America mean to you and how it's changed for her, but how she still has so much hope for her nation, even though her nation is doing something horrible to her at the moment and hates her at the moment. And I think this is an excellent final text to really encapsulate America, because so far we've talked about a lot of horrible history. We've talked about Native American genocide and slavery and segregation and Islamophobia, and it's dark. But Kenoshi, even though she's in the dark, she still has so much hope. And so it really shows how, yes, America has had a rough past, but there's so much more it could be. And I feel like this really creates a full circle of America. Yes, she's bad sometimes, but there's still hope. And that hope is something I really want to instill in my students and not leave them all doom and gloom, that they are the change. And that's something I really want them to understand, is their agency and their ability for change. So at the end, what does America mean to you? At the beginning of this, I do want them to have a prompt about what does America mean to you initially, and then at the end of this text set, I'll be like, what does America mean to you, in order to compare and contrast. Did America change for you? Has it stayed the same? So that is the end of my text set and my central question about America and what does it mean for us as individuals and what does it mean to be American. If you have any questions for me, feel free to contact me at cheyenne.mitchell@okstate.edu, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.